So welcome to the Dublin Citizens Assembly on our fourth session on Saturday the 10th of September 2022, and welcome indeed to those joining us online today for our fourth and really important session. Welcome back to everybody. I hope everybody had a fantastic summer and you look nice and relaxed and refreshed and ready to go for today's endeavours. Just a few housekeeping rules before we start into the programme. We're going to give a brief introduction on really why we're here, how we're going to do our work on behalf of the citizens of Dublin, and then the next steps. And indeed, when we just to remind ourselves the purpose of why we're here, it's always good to refer back to our terms of reference. And when we look at those, our terms of reference dictate from the government that a Citizens' Assembly, to be known as the Dublin Citizens' Assembly, is convened to consider the type of directly elected mayor and the local government structures that are best suited for Dublin. And they were going to bring forward proposals in that regard and make a report and recommendation to the Houses of the Oireachtas. And then our government will consider those and make some proposals, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. We're doing that through the deliberative democracy process, which is really important, and it's about really getting the citizens and people closer to government and closer to decision making. And really it's about us as citizens in the state shaping politics, and that's what we're doing. A part of it then is a journey that we need to go on as we consider those two main points. And just to recap very briefly, we met, and our first meeting was back in the 9th of April. It's a long time ago now. A lot of water has travelled under that bridge, the Halfpenny Bridge. Lots of bends and twists in the river, and there'll be more bends, I think, before, and twists and turns, and maybe a little bit of turbulence today, I'd imagine, as we consider what we'll vote on in 4 weeks' time. One of our first collective meetings we had was dealing on the 29th of April, dealing with a number of issues. And part of the deliberative democracy process is information gathering and getting briefs from people who are experts in their particular field. And we spoke about what is Dublin. We spoke about the local government structure we have with the 4 local authorities. We spoke about the powers they have, and then we spoke about some of the funding models. We then came back for our third meeting in May, and at this we spoke about specific challenges. We had our 4 current mayors, if you can recall the talk that they gave us, and we had some international speakers in as well. And again, we were again forming our thoughts. We were having good discourse and balanced discourse, and considering arguments, and again, I'm sure, like we have done before, when we open it up to you, to the Assembly members, you'll be asking our EAG, our Expert Advisory Group, and indeed our guests today, some more probing questions, which is part of that process. We then met in June, our last session before we broke for the summer, and we had a look at devolution, the powers, we had a look at finance and funding. We spoke about Limerick. We had a brief on the Limerick experience. We had a commerce and a business perspective, and indeed a political view from a former Taoiseach who spoke to us about his thoughts on this particular process. So now we're back on the 10th of September, and we're going to give you initially some feedback from predominantly driven from the facilitators and notes that were very comprehensive, and we really appreciate them from, I suppose, from my perspective as the chair, and indeed from the EAG and the Secretariat. And from that, then we have developed some structures, some proposals to make to you, some ideas for you to consider. And again, you'll have some questions and you'll debate them amongst yourselves, and we'll have different views. And eventually then I think we'll come to, we would hope, to a consensus. One of the strengths of this Assembly is its diversity. We've a cross-section of society, a cross-section throughout the county of Dublin, and that really is our strength. But we all won't agree on particular points, but I think we hope to come to a consensus. And finally then, this afternoon, we'll go into drafting that ballot based on your thoughts and your consensus. And then on the 1st of October, we'll come back together to vote upon what you think as the Assembly members should be the structure, should be the powers, the funding, and other matters that you deem necessary to bring as recommendations to our elected representatives in both houses of the Oireachtas. So we've gone through a number of steps. We're getting close to our destination. We're not there yet, and as I said, we have some twist left in the river. I just want to frame for the next few moments the process and where we fit in it, because I think it is important to have that context of what part do we play in shaping the Dublin of the future. Are we legislative? Do we have those powers to write bills and vote upon them? We don't, and I just want to explain that. But we have some might consider a small part. I consider it a significant part to get this boat on its journey. And as I said, that is, part of that process is about us as citizens, free citizens, getting closer to our elected representatives and our decision makers. And I just want to really talk about what happens then when we submit our report to the Houses of the Oireachtas, just to put today's work and October's work in context. If I could just go back to the first number of steps, and this is what I would call the foundation steps. We've been convened by the government. We have 80 members of the Assembly. We have 12 of our elected representatives, our councillors, and I'm really grateful for the time and effort that they've put into this process. We have 67 citizens, and I'm the 68th as the chair. And we've been convened, as I mentioned earlier on, to consider what type of directly elected mayor and local government structures are best suited for Dublin. And then we bring those proposals forward to the Houses of the Oireachtas. And that's the foundation step. But it's a really significant and important step in the process. But there's a long way to go after that. And I just want to explain that very briefly. Next, we have what's called our government response. What I call the government response. We make the report, we make the recommendations, then the government will stand up what's a committee made up of TDs and senators from both houses. And what they will do, they will look at our report, look at your report, they'll come up with some conclusions, and they'll have debates on what you recommend. And then, and I quote, and this is a quote that I have in the last bullet point there. This is from the terms of reference. And the government will provide a response to each recommendation that you will make over the coming weeks. If they accept some or all of them, we would hope maybe all, but they will then indicate a time frame that the government envisages for the implementation of those recommendations. And that's a really important bit for me, and I'm sure for you as well, that you've gone to the trouble of putting your personal time on hold to be with us here, to represent the citizens of Dublin, to put recommendations to shape the future of Dublin, to make it a great place to work, to live, and to visit. And we will expect our political system to act upon our recommendations. The next bit is what's called, I would call the drafting phase. And again, just put it in context, what happens, the proposals that those committees and the government will make are agreed by Cabinet. The government will then ask the Attorney General to draft the bill. So we're not involved in that process. That's a matter for the Attorney General, the professionals in that field. And then when the text is ready for publication, it is normally sent to an Oireachtas committee for consideration. That's the way it normally happens. However, because the committee has already been set up when we give the report in both houses, that step might not happen. But again, that's up to the government to decide. The next step, I would say, is a big one. It's going through the houses of the Oireachtas, and the minister who is responsible for local government will introduce the bill. It can be introduced either in either house, the lower upper house, the Dáil, or indeed the Seanad. The bill has to go through 5 stages in both the Seanad and the Dáil. That's 10 stages it has to go through. And it'll be undertaking a detailed examination by both opposition parties. And then during that phase, those stages, there's a number of opportunities to change the text of the bill. But once the bill then finally gets to the fifth stage, it's passed by both houses, by the upper and the lower house. And sometimes that requires a vote. And then the bill is ready to be enacted. I hope you're still with me, because it's a long journey. It's a long journey. And the final bit then is the enactment. On Tuachtaráin na hÉireann will, he or she has 7 days. They have 7 days to consider the bill, and then it's signed into law. Or if they don't agree with it, they can refer it to the Supreme Court. We hope that doesn't happen. And then the bill will become an act, and then is added to the statute book, and it becomes law. And that's our objective here, is that it becomes law that Dublin will have a directly elected mayor. Well, that's what we think. Well, that's what I think, certainly. And then the commencement. Just want to speak about that. When does it commence? If the legislation that our legislative this design, they might decide that there's a need for a commencement order, and if that, the minister will sign it and will nominate a commencement date for the act. Otherwise, the law becomes into effect when the president signs it. So I hope that would explains to you at a very high level, but in detail nonetheless, to understand what our part we're playing in this journey today and in a number of weeks' time. The bit, and there's been an asterisk there at the top right-hand corner. There are no timeframes imposed on legislative process. Making the laws of the land takes as long as it takes. Now, we would hope that, based on our recommendations, that our political system, as I said, will act upon it, because they've given us timelines. We had to hold our inaugural meeting in April. We had to complete within an 8-month period. We would hope that our politicians and the government will do likewise. And it is our intent to submit your report, and it's your report, to the House of the Oireachtas before the 1st of December this year. Okay, you can all take a big deep breath, but consider the really important work you have to do. And I'm going to conclude, but just go back down to the programme. I've concluded this is my opening session, my opening remarks. Now we're going to go into feedback from the last meeting. And I'm delighted to have with us our expert advisory group. We have Professor Derek O'Brien, Dr. Breed Quinn, Dr. Ada Quinlivan, and Dr. Jane Suter. They are the composition of the EAG. I'm delighted to be joined by some of the other experts who have been with us on this journey. Dr. Sean O'Riordan, who joined us via Zoom, and it's great to see Sean with us here today in person, so Sean, you're very welcome. Dr. Brian Caulfield, who will deal with transport matters. Dr. Mark Caulfield, who you remember, who's with us from the IPA. Professor Joe O'Hara, who dealt with us in education, and they will be available throughout the day to answer any of your questions, so take advantage of them, of their time with us here today. The third section on today's programme is the voices from the members. So this is a bit of an initiative. We had some maybe convincing to do with Art, our secretary, who's been, and his team, to convince, I suppose, the benefits of it. And I've seen this probably from a sporting perspective. We do a lot of this with the Dublin football team back in the day, where we would empower the players, empower the people who matter to come up with their deliberations and give feedback to the general group. And that's what we want to do today. We want to give you the chance to put on a small presentation what you think should be the structures, the devolved powers, and other matters that you consider relevant. And then you'll have a representative from your table who'll come up and present for 5 minutes what those thoughts are. And we're going to go through 11 of those. It's a really important part of it, but I think it's a really important piece of empowering you to share and then your thoughts, and then hopefully we can come up with a consensus. And then the concluding stage of this morning will be, we'll talk about the structures of the ballot based on what you give back to us during the course of the day. And that, we hope, will set us up nicely to have a vote on the 1st of October in St. Patrick's Hall in Dublin Castle. So, once again, I want to thank you for your time today. As you can see, it's a busy programme. Hope you get the context now of what we're doing in terms of those recommendations. And I'm going to have the great pleasure now to present Lorraine. Congratulations on the birth of your daughter Eve. A lovely bottle of bubbly that you can enjoy this evening. Not today. So, Lorraine, congratulations. Oh, the baby here. Oh, the baby's here. Oh, wow. So now we have 81 members of the Assembly. Congratulations, Eve. Yeah. So now can I call on to the next stage of this morning's programme, over to the EAG. Thank you.